When did they first approach you to do the analyst work?
Well, I don't know if you know, but I actually started working for the UFC back in 1997, back in the old organization. It's UFC 12, I believe, was the first one I did, and that was in Dothan, Alabama. And that was actually Vitor Belfort's debut when he was 19 years old. And I was so fortunate back in the day to just be there. It's really a part of history now. I mean, now when I go to Mandalay Bay and there's 15,000 people there and it's packed to the gills and everyone's screaming and cheering, I still fondly remember, doing these little Augusta, Georgia, tiny little auditoriums where there was, maybe 100 or rather 1,200 people in the audience at most, and there was hundreds of empty seats. And when the fights would go to the ground, people would yell "gay," and it was really it was fascinating. I mean, I got to see the debut of Dan Henderson.
Was Augusta Couture? Because I think he told the story that the weigh-in was at a Holiday Inn in Augusta, Georgia.
Yes, it was. Yeah. I got to see. Yeah, that was Randy. Yep. Yeah, I got to see Mark Coleman defeat Dan Severn for the very first UFC heavyweight championship. It was a really unique time. I got to really be a part of a great sports history. It's really, I had an amazing opportunity. And I did it it was very unorganized, though. The SEG UFC is not the Zuffa UFC. It's a completely different animal. It was the first time I ever worked for them, when I did post-fight interviews, that's what I did, they didn't tell me anything. I mean, literally, when I say they didn't tell me anything, they told me nothing. They gave me a microphone. They gave me a job. They said, "So you like the UFC, right?" I said, "Yeah, I love it. It's my favorite sport." And they said, "Okay, great. You want a job interviewing fighters?" And I said, "Okay." And so they just gave me a microphone, and then literally the first UFC, they said, "Okay, you're going to talk about the UFC. We're going to come to you in 10 seconds." They turned the camera on me, ready, go. It was just fortunate that I was a stand-up comedian, and then I, done a bunch of television things already, so I knew how to talk on camera. But it was these people are crazy. You're going live on pay-per-view. You don't know what I know about it. There's no meetings. There's no discussion of, what are you looking for. It was just complete chaos.
They must have known you had a jiu-jitsu background, though, right?
Well, I barely had a jiu-jitsu background back then.
Oh, okay.
That was more the Taekwondo days. I was, as a kid, I was a U.S. Open Taekwondo champion, and I won the Massachusetts State Championships 4 years in a row. That was really my background, was striking. And then in 1996, I started training jiu-jitsu, and that's actually how I met Vitor. I met Vitor before he ever entered into the UFC. I was training at Carlson Gracie School in Hollywood, and that was also one of the ways that I got involved in the UFC. They had, found out through the grapevine that I was a student and that I was interested in the sport.
So Brock Lesnar is going to be in Vegas now for the next 6 weeks. I will tell everyone, don't drive anywhere near the Palms, anywhere near the UFC gym, just in case he's pissed off leaving the taping. Are you surprised that he took the role in that show?
Yes, I am surprised. I didn't know what he was going to do after the Cain Velasquez loss, and very clearly in that fight, he was exposed, as he was exposed in the Shane Carwin fight. And it's really a fascinating matchup with him and Dos Santos, because this is if you look at Dos Santos versus him on paper, man, I mean, that's the guy that he would probably be avoiding the most. I mean, even more than Cain, even more than Shane, I think Dos Santos has the best hands in the heavyweight division. I mean, he's got very sharp, really quick counters. I think Shane Carwin is probably the biggest puncher in the division, and he can pretty much stop anybody if he connects with them. But he's a slower guy, and his technique is not quite as clean. Dos Santos has very clean, crisp counters. If you look at the left hook that he dropped Gonzaga with, there's not a whole lot of guys in the UFC that can land a shot like that. You know what I'm saying? And so, for Brock, I think this is a big challenge, a huge challenge. I mean, this is a very, very much he must impose his game. He's got to get that guy to the ground. If he gets the guy to the ground, man, I mean, look, Brock on top of you is the biggest nightmare in the sport. He's huge, he's powerful, he's a very, very skilled wrestler, but, he's obviously got some deep holes in his game as far as stand-up goes. He just doesn't like to get hit.
Did you buy any of the talk that he may just walk away from the sport and go back to wrestling?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. After that beating that he took by Cain, I mean, that was a rout. That wasn't a close fight by any stretch of the imagination. From the beginning of the fight to the end, it was very clear who was the better fighter. you know, by a long shot. You know, it's one of those fights where you watch it and you go, man, how could you justify a rematch here? You know, he would have to come out guns blazing and really smash Junior Dos Santos and do it in convincing fashion and prove that he can take a couple punches too. You know, he would have to like stay in the pocket with Junior and then get him to the ground and beat him down. He would have to do it really resounding fashion to try to get people excited about a rematch.
You know what, Joe? I think that it's kind of proof of what I've been saying for quite some time about mixed martial arts, is that it's reached the point now in terms of legitimacy where guys that are coming from other sports, they may be great athletes and they may be able to get by, but they're not going to be able to flourish against guys who have made this their first sport from day one.
Yeah, it's really kind of freaky to watch it evolve the way it has, and you know, and to have seen it really from the very, very early days. It's they're the real true mixed martial artists of today are on such a high level as opposed to 1993. I mean, that was only, you know, that's not that long ago. 18 years ago, that's nothing. You know, as far as sports go, the leap. I mean, if you go back to like, you know, Marvin Hagler and compare Marvin Hagler with like maybe Chad Dawson, you know, Hagler hangs with these guys. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think there's a big gap. Sugar Ray Leonard, I think Sugar Ray Leonard, you know, he hangs with Floyd Mayweather. I think he's one of, if you look at like skill-wise, there's not that much of a variation between the greats of 20-plus years ago and the greats of today in boxing. But in MMA, it's a giant leap. It's a Grand Canyon chasm. I mean, it's huge. The guys that you see today and the variations in the styles today. I mean, you've got like the Nick Diaz, who's got this really unorthodox striking style, which is, you know, really oddly effective. And then you've got Alistair Overeem, who's, you know, K1 Grand Prix champion and also a Strikeforce champion and also a Dream champion. And then you've got, you know, Cain Velasquez, who's this guy who just seems to never get tired. It's an incredible cardio machine that's also got an iron chin and, you know, an unbelievable work ethic. And you got George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva, who fights like he's in the Matrix. I mean, really, it's an amazing time for the sport.
Let's close on this, and we're talking to Joe Rogan. He's playing Mandalay this weekend before he does UFC 126 at Mandalay. The tickets are just $35 and $45. You can go up to MandalayBay.com, and he's playing in the theater there at Mandalay Bay. So you mentioned Belfort and how long you go back with him, and you know those of us who watch fighting for a long time know of Vitor. I kind of feel in this fight he's about a 3-1 dog against Anderson Silva, but I kind of feel like he's under the radar with a lot of the new fans. Or am I wrong? Does he stand no chance in this fight?
Well, I think he's definitely under the radar with a lot of people just by virtue of the fact that Anderson's been so dominant. I mean, Anderson hasn't lost a fight since, I believe, 2006. He's never lost in the UFC, and his highlight reel performances against, like, Chris Lieben and Rich Franklin and James Irvin and Forrest Griffin. I mean, he's a destroyer. Anderson is the most dynamic, most skilled, most spectacular fighter in any weight class, in any division, period, in my opinion. But Vitor, if you looked at it on paper, he's got all the tools. I mean, he's been around a long, long time. And even though he's been around a long time, Vitor's never really taken a beating other than the Randy Couture fight. You know, he's lost fights, but you know, he's had a lot of problems in his personal life, and you can attribute some of his poor performances to that. It's very tricky. You know, it's very tricky when you start getting into a fighter's mental makeup and, you know, who they are now as opposed to who they were a couple of years ago when they were in the dumps. You know, Anderson is very strong and very steady and is very reliable. He's always there. He's always trying to win. And he showed that in the Chael Sonnen fight. I mean, still trying to win in the fifth round after being dominated for 4 solid rounds, just getting his ass kicked completely, unable to do anything to Chael Sonnen. And then waits his opportunity, bam, slaps on a triangle, and that's it. He's always trying to win. He never folds, ever. You might beat him, but he will never fold. Vitor has folded, you know, and it's been a long time. We haven't seen it in a long time, but it's in people's minds. But then you got to think about the fact that his sister was kidnapped, and he went through a lot of like serious personal problems, and you know those contribute to a fighter's demise, and those also make a fighter stronger once they get through it. And that's what Vitor says now, that he is, because of all the dilemmas that he faced, he's a much stronger. He has much more character because of it. So I think if you look at it skill-wise, Vitor has the fastest hands in maybe in the sport, period. I mean, Melvin Gillard might be the only one who comes close to his hand speed. famous combinations that he lands on, like the Trey Telligman fight, or Rich Franklin more recently, or even Matt Lindland when he fought Matt Lindland in Affliction. I mean, he's a destroyer and he's a finisher. If he catches you, he swarms on you. He's a legit black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he has some serious wrestling skills. And that, to me, is an interesting aspect of this fight, because if you look at his fight with Chuck Liddell, he's one of the rare guys that took Chuck Liddell down during his prime. He took Chuck down. If he looks at the Chael Sonnen fight, he might think that that's the approach to take in this fight. Ground and pound, take Anderson down, and try to dominate him from the top position. Now, I'm not totally aware of what he's been doing in his training.
Yeah.
But if that's the approach, I think this could be a very unique fight. And on the feet, he's as dangerous as anybody.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. One last question. I think that's the problem. Here in Vegas, we've been kind of tracking where he is, and he was with Sean Tompkins, who's more of a striking guy. Then he moves over to Couture. Then you hear he's working with other people. He's bouncing around. So to me, the game plan is the biggest thing. I know he can stand with Silva, but I wouldn't do that for 3, 4, and 5 rounds. If he takes him down, obviously he can win the fight, but who knows who's doing the game planning.
Well, that is true. I mean, Sean Tompkins was with him for a while, and Sean was responsible, in Sean's opinion, for getting him into a real positive state of mind. And he had a bunch of victories in a row with Sean. And I don't know what happened that led him to move on. So it's just speculation. But I think stand-up wise, I see what you're saying. He doesn't want to stand with Anderson, but I don't think that's true. I think Vitor is very, very confident in his hands. I don't think Vitor has ever shied away from anybody in the stand-up. The only time I can remember him shying away from someone in stand-up is when he broke his hand against Sakuraba. But that was, back in the days of his sister being kidnapped. He had a lot of problems back then.
Yeah, I guess I meant if I was a fighter, I wouldn't want to stand with Silva.
Yeah, but maybe not. Look at what happened with Anderson and Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen dropped Anderson with a left hand. He connected. If Vitor drops Anderson like that, it's a completely different story. His punches come legitimately 100% faster. You're dealing with a guy that's capable of, incredible flurries. Vitor's famous for it. The ones that he used to knock out Vanderlei Silva, the one that the combinations he unloaded on Matt Lindland and on Rich Franklin. If he hurts guys, he swarms on them. It's a very, very intriguing fight to me. And Vitor is saying all the right things. He seems so at peace. He doesn't seem nervous. He seems confident and sure of himself and ready to do this. And I'm very intrigued. I cannot wait. I really, really fired up about this fight. To me, I think it's the most intriguing challenge and the most difficult challenge, at least on paper, in Anderson Silva's career.
Awesome spot, Joe. One more time, tell everyone in Vegas about the show on Friday.
Oh, Friday night, Mandalay Bay Theater. If you are easily offended, you certainly will be offended, so don't come.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
There you go, Joe Rogan.